The desert sun beat down mercilessly as Jake Morrison drove the last of the stolen cattle toward the canyon, blood seeping through the makeshift bandage on his shoulder. 3 days ago, he'd been a ranch hand on the Double R. Now he was a thief, or so the sheriff's posse believed. The real rustlers had framed him perfectly, left him wounded and running with 100 head of cattle that didn't belong to him. His horse stumbled, exhausted. Jake knew he couldn't run much farther. The canyon ahead offered shelter, but also a trap. He had no choice. As he urged his mount forward, riders emerged from the rocks. 6 Apache warriors, their faces painted, weapons ready. Jake's hand moved to his pistol, but a deep voice stopped him cold. "Don't fight, stranger," said the Apache leader, a man with iron-gray hair and the bearing of someone who'd commanded warriors for decades. "You are surrounded. You will die." Before you continue with Jake's desperate situation, I'd love to ask you to take a moment to subscribe to the From Wild West channel and give this video a like. Your support truly matters and motivates us to bring you more quality stories like this one. I'm curious, where are you listening from today? Jake slowly raised his hands, his shoulders screaming with pain. The chief rode closer, studying him with eyes that missed nothing. The fresh wound, the exhausted horse, the cattle bearing another ranch's brand. "You steal?" the chief said. It wasn't a question. "No, sir." Jake's voice was rough with thirst. "I was framed. Real thieves shot me and left me to take the blame." The chief's expression didn't change. He spoke in Apache to his warriors, and they moved to surround Jake completely. "Many white men lie. Why should I believe you?" "Because if I were a thief, I'd have run toward Mexico, not into Apache territory." Jake met the chief's gaze steadily, despite his fear. "I came here because I'm desperate, not stupid. I was hoping you might trade the cattle for safe passage." One of the warriors laughed harshly, translating for the others. The chief raised his hand for silence. "I am Goyakla," he said. "These are my people. We do not need stolen cattle. They bring soldiers to our land." His eyes narrowed. "But you interest me, cowboy. You do not beg. You do not grovel. You offer trade like an equal. I don't see any reason not to treat you as one," Jake said, though his vision was starting to blur from blood loss. Goyakla studied him a moment longer, then spoke rapid Apache. 2 warriors dismounted and seized Jake, pulling him roughly from his horse. He hit the ground hard, his wounded shoulder exploding with fresh pain. Through the haze, he heard Goyakla's voice. "You will come to our camp. If you speak truth, perhaps you live. If you lie." He didn't need to finish. Jake barely remembered the ride to the Apache camp, hidden deep in the canyon. He was aware of being dragged from his horse, of voices arguing in a language he didn't understand, of being thrown into a shelter made of brush and hides. Then darkness claimed him. He woke to cool water on his lips and the scent of herbs. A woman's face hovered above him, young, beautiful, with eyes as dark and fierce as a hawk's. She wore deerskin decorated with intricate beadwork, her long black hair braided with strips of red cloth. "Drink," she said in accented English. "You lose much blood." Jake drank gratefully, then tried to sit up. Pain lanced through his shoulder, and her hand pressed firmly against his chest, holding him down with surprising strength. "You rest. I clean wound." "Who are you?" Jake managed. "Halona, daughter of Goyakla." Her hands moved efficiently, unwrapping his crude bandage. She made a disapproving sound. Bullet still inside. Must come out. Wait! But she was already heating a knife in the fire outside the wickiup. The extraction was agony. Jake bit down on the leather strap she gave him, sweat pouring down his face as she dug the bullet from his flesh. But her hands were skilled and certain, and when it was finally over, he sagged back against the furs, breathing hard. "You are strong," Helona said, pressing a poultice of herbs to the wound. "Most white men scream." "Most white men probably have more sense than to ride into Apache territory," Jake gasped. Her lips curved slightly, almost a smile. "This is true." She began wrapping clean cloth around his shoulder. "My father says you claim innocence, says you were framed." "I was. 3 men, the Slater brothers. They've been rustling from ranches all over the territory. When the owner caught them, they shot me and left me with the herd." Jake met her eyes. "I've got no reason to lie to you. I'm already at your mercy." "Mercy is not something my people have much experience with," Helona said quietly. "From white men." The words hung heavy between them. Jake knew the history, the broken treaties, the massacres, the forced relocations. He had no defense to offer. "I'm sorry," he said finally, "for what that's worth." Helona's eyes widened slightly, as if the apology surprised her. She finished bandaging his shoulder in silence, then stood. "Rest. Tomorrow, council decides your fate." She left him alone in the wickiup, and Jake stared at the smoke hole above, wondering if he'd see another sunrise. Over the next 3 days, as his fever broke and strength slowly returned, Jake became aware of the camp's rhythms. Children played outside his shelter, their laughter universal, despite the foreign words. Women worked at various tasks, tanning hides, grinding corn, weaving baskets. Warriors came and went, always alert, always watching. And Helona came twice daily to change his bandages and bring him food. She spoke little, but Jake found himself watching for her visits, studying the proud line of her jaw, the graceful efficiency of her movements, the intelligence in her eyes. "Why are you helping me?" he asked on the 3rd day. "You could have let me die." Helona was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on the bandage. "My brother died last winter, shot by soldiers while hunting. He was far from any settlement, threatening no one. They killed him because he was Apache." She looked up, her eyes fierce with old pain. "He was 19 summers. He had never hurt anyone." Jake's throat tightened. "I'm sorry." "You say this word often. Sorry." Helona resumed wrapping the bandage. "But you are not the one who killed him. Why do you apologize?" "Because I'm white. Because my people did it. Because—" Jake struggled to articulate something he'd never quite put into words. "Because it's wrong, and someone should say it." Helona studied his face for a long moment. "You are strange for a white man. I get that a lot." Jake attempted a smile, though the situation was far from funny. This time, her lips definitely curved. "Wound heals well. Tomorrow, you will stand before council." That night, Jake couldn't sleep. He could hear the camp settling into rest, low voices, the crackle of dying fires, a baby's cry quickly soothed. He thought about his own life before this, drifting from ranch to ranch, no family, no real home. If the council decided to kill him, who would even know? Who would care? He was dwelling on these cheerful thoughts when Helona appeared at the wickiup entrance, her face troubled. "Come," she whispered urgently. Quietly. Jake's heart hammered. "What's wrong?" "Soldiers, coming up the canyon." Someone told them we are here. Her jaw tightened. There is a traitor, a warrior angry that my father spared you. He rode to the fort. Jesus. Jake struggled to his feet, swaying. How many? 20, maybe more. They will be here by dawn. Halona's eyes were fierce. My father moves the women and children to the high caves. The warriors will stay and fight. That's suicide. 20 soldiers with rifles. We know. Her voice was flat. But we buy time for the others to escape. This is how it always is. Jake's mind raced. He knew the army's tactics, knew how they'd surround the camp, cut off escape routes. There's another way. Let me go to them. I'll tell them I escaped, that I don't know where you went. I'll lead them away from here. Halona stared at him. They will not believe you. Maybe not, but it might buy you enough time. Jake grabbed his shirt, wincing as he pulled it over his bandaged shoulder. Where's my horse? You do this? For us? Halona's voice held disbelief. We are your enemy. No. Jake met her eyes. You're the people who saved my life when you could have killed me. That makes you something else entirely. For a moment, Halona was motionless. Then she moved, swift and decisive. Come, I take you to your horse. They moved through the sleeping camp like shadows. Jake's shoulder throbbed with every step, but adrenaline kept him moving. Halona led him to where the horses were picketed, helped him saddle his mount with quick, efficient movements. The canyon forks 3 miles south, she whispered. Take the western branch. It leads to the desert. The eastern branch goes to the caves where our people hide. I'll remember. Jake swung into the saddle, gritting his teeth against the pain. Halona, go, before someone sees. But her hand caught his briefly, her touch warm and solid. You are brave for a strange white man. Jake wanted to say more, to tell her that in 3 days she'd shown him more humanity than he'd found in years of drifting. That her fierce pride and gentle hands had awakened something in him he'd thought long dead, but there was no time. He rode south through the darkness, pushing his tired horse hard. As dawn broke, he heard them. The cavalry patrol, riding north in formation. Jake spurred his mount directly toward them, waving his hat. Hold fire! I'm white! I'm a hostage! The patrol surrounded him, rifles raised. A young lieutenant rode forward, his face suspicious. Identify yourself. Jake Morrison, ranch hand from the R. I was taken by Apache raiders 3 days ago. They held me in their camp. He pointed vaguely northwest, away from the actual location. Back that way, about 8 miles. They left last night, headed for Mexico. Mexico? The lieutenant frowned. You sure? I heard them talking. They knew soldiers were coming. Jake made himself sound shaken, traumatized. They were packing up when I got loose and ran. The lieutenant studied him. The crude bandage, the exhaustion, the desperation that wasn't entirely feigned. You're wounded. They shot me when I tried to escape the first time. Jake's horse danced nervously, sensing his tension. Look, I don't care what you do, but if you're hunting Apache, you're headed the wrong way. The lieutenant conferred with his sergeant, then turned back to Jake. Show us this camp. Jake's heart sank. He'd hoped they'd just ride for Mexico, but he had no choice. He led them northwest, deeper into the maze of canyons, choosing paths that would take hours to navigate. He rode slowly, claiming his wound made him weak. He took wrong turns, backtracked, generally did everything possible to waste time. By noon, the lieutenant's patience was wearing thin. You sure you know where you're going? Everything looks the same in these canyons, Jake protested. I was half-conscious when they brought me in. Finally, they reached a small box canyon, nowhere near the Apache camp. Jake pointed to where he'd kicked over a fire pit the night before, scattered some supplies he'd carried in his saddlebags. This is it. This is where they held me. The lieutenant surveyed the empty canyon, his face darkening. There's no one here. I told you, they left last night. Jake made himself sound frustrated. They must be 20 miles south by now. The sergeant examined the cold fire, the scattered supplies. Tracks lead out to the south, sir. Fresh ones. That much was true. Jake had ridden in from the south to create the trail. The lieutenant made a decision. We'll pursue south. Morrison, you're coming with us to identify these Apache if we catch them. Jake's stomach dropped, but he nodded. Yes, sir. They rode hard through the afternoon, chasing shadows. Jake's shoulder was screaming, his vision blurring, but he stayed in the saddle through sheer will. As the sun set, the lieutenant finally called a halt. We've lost them. His disgust was evident. Damn Apache can disappear like smoke. Sir, Jake said carefully, I need medical attention. That bullet wound is infected. The lieutenant looked at him, really looked, and Jake saw him register the fever flush, the way Jake swayed in the saddle. Sergeant, get this man to the fort surgeon. Rest of you, we camp here tonight and head back at dawn. The sergeant and 2 soldiers escorted Jake toward Fort Bowie, a day's ride away. As they traveled, Jake allowed himself to hope. He'd bought the Apache time. Halona and her people would be deep in the mountains by now, safe, at least for the moment. At the fort, the surgeon cleaned and rebandaged Jake's wound, gave him laudanum for the pain. He slept for 16 hours straight, waking to find a marshal sitting beside his cot. Mr. Morrison, I'm Marshal Brennan. We need to talk about those cattle you were found with. Jake's story came out in pieces. The rustling, the frame-up, the desperate flight. Brennan listened with the weary skepticism of a man who'd heard every lie ever told. The Slater brothers, you say? Yes, sir. They've been working the territory for months. Someone at the Double R must have been helping them. They knew which herds to hit, when the hands would be out on the range. Brennan stroked his mustache thoughtfully. Interesting, because 2 days ago we caught 3 men trying to cross into Mexico with 100 head of cattle. They matched the description of the Slater brothers. Jake's heart leaped. You caught them? They put up a fight. 2 are dead, 1's in custody. Brennan leaned forward. He's singing like a canary, trying to save his neck. Says there's a 4th partner, a ranch hand who got cold feet and ran with one of the herds. That's a lie, Jake said flatly. They shot me and left me to take the fall. So he says. Brennan pulled out a notebook. But here's the interesting part. He also claims you rode off into Apache territory. Said you'd be dead within the day. He paused. Yet here you are. Mind telling me how you survived 3 days in Chiricahua country? Jake chose his words carefully. I got lucky. Found a canyon with water. Kept my head down and rode out when the coast was clear. That right? Brennan's eyes were sharp. Because the cavalry patrol that found you said you claimed Apache raiders took you hostage. Damn. Jake had forgotten the lie he'd told the lieutenant. I was confused, fevered. I don't remember much. Uh-huh. Brennan didn't look convinced. Well, Mr. Morrison, you're free to go. The Slater testimony corroborates your story about the frame-up. But, he stood, his voice hardening, if I find out you've been consorting with hostiles, harboring fugitives from justice, I'll see you hang. Understood? Understood, Jake said, though his mind was already elsewhere. Back in a hidden canyon, with a fierce-eyed woman, who'd saved his life. Jake recovered at the fort for 2 weeks, working odd jobs to earn supplies and a decent horse. Every day, he thought about Halona. Every night, he dreamed of her hands on his skin, her voice saying his name. He knew he was a fool. She was Apache, he was white, and their worlds were at war. But knowing it didn't change how he felt. When he was finally strong enough to ride, he didn't head back to ranching. Instead, he rode into the mountains, toward the hidden canyon where it had all begun. The Apache camp was gone, of course. The wickiups had been dismantled, the fire pits scattered, all traces erased. Jake sat on his horse, staring at the empty space, feeling hollow. "You came back." He spun in the saddle. Halona stood among the rocks, her rifle pointed at his chest. She looked thinner, harder, but her eyes still held that fierce intelligence. "I came back," Jake confirmed, his heart hammering. "I had to know. Did everyone get away safe?" "Yes, the soldiers never found us." She lowered the rifle slightly. "You kept them away. My father says you have honor." "Your father's alive?" Relief flooded through him. "Yes, all our people live." Halona moved closer, her eyes searching his face. "Your wound healed?" "Well enough." Jake dismounted slowly, keeping his hands visible. "Halona, I couldn't stop thinking about you, about your people. I know I'm probably crazy, but... And you probably think I'm even crazier, but... Why did you come?" she interrupted. "To ease your white man's guilt?" "No." Jake took a step closer. "I came because for 3 days you treated me with more kindness than I've received in 10 years of drifting. Because you're brave and strong and beautiful. And when I'm around you, I feel like I could be someone worth something." He stopped, feeling foolish. "I came because I had to see you again." Halona stared at him, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she slung the rifle over her shoulder. "You are a fool." "Yeah, I get that a lot." "A fool who saved my people." She moved closer, reaching up to touch his face with calloused fingers. "A fool who came back, knowing we could kill him." "Worth the risk," Jake said, his breath catching at her touch. "My father wishes to see you," Halona said. "He has questions." Jake followed her through hidden paths to a new camp, even more remote than the last. Goyakla sat by a fire, surrounded by his warriors. Kuruk, the one who'd betrayed them, was notably absent. "Cowboy," Goyakla said, "you return. This surprises me." "It surprises me too, sir," Jake admitted. "But I couldn't stay away." "My daughter says you risked your life to mislead the soldiers, to give us time to escape." The chief's eyes were penetrating. "Why?" "Because it was the right thing to do." Jake met his gaze steadily. "And because your daughter saved my life when she could have let me die. I owed that debt. And now, the debt is paid. Why are you here?" Jake glanced at Halona, then back at the chief. "Because I'd like permission to court your daughter, sir. If she's willing." Silence fell over the camp. Several warriors laughed outright, but Goyakla's expression didn't change. "You know this is impossible," he said quietly. "You are white. We are at war with your people. You would bring only danger to her." "I know." Jake's voice was steady. "But I'm not like most white men. I don't care about Apache or white. I care about people who show courage, who protect their families, who live with honor. I've seen..." She was quiet for a long moment, her face unreadable. Then, "He may stay, on trial. We will see if his actions match his words. Over the following weeks, Jake worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life. He helped hunt, though the Apache methods were far different from white men's. He learned to track, to move silently, to read the language of birds and wind. He fetched water, gathered wood, did whatever tasks needed doing without complaint. And slowly, grudgingly, the camp began to accept him. The children lost their fear, approaching to touch his strange light hair. The women let him help with heavy work. Even the warriors began to nod to him in passing. But it was Halona he worked hardest to win. He brought her wildflowers from the high meadows. He spent hours learning Apache words just to speak with her in her own tongue. He listened when she spoke of her people's history, of the land they'd lost, of the future she feared. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, she turned to him. "You should go back to your people, Jake. This life, it is too hard for someone not born to it. My people are ranchers who'd probably shoot me on sight for being an Apache sympathizer." Jake said dryly, "And hard work doesn't scare me. What scares me is going back to drifting, alone, without purpose." He met her eyes. "You give me purpose, Halona. This place, these people, for the first time in my life, I feel like I belong somewhere." "You would give up your world for this?" She gestured to the simple camp. "For a people hunted by your government, for a woman you barely know." "I would give up anything," Jake said quietly, "for a chance to be with you." Halona was silent, her face in profile against the dying light. Then, "My brother, the one who died, his name was Kella. It means sparrow. He loved to laugh." Her voice was soft with memory. "After he died, I thought I would never feel light again. Never feel anything but anger and grief. And now?" Jake asked gently. "Now." She turned to him, and he saw tears gleaming in her eyes. "Now, when I am with you, sometimes I forget to be angry. Sometimes I feel something like hope." She touched his face, her palm warm against his cheek. "This frightens me more than soldiers or death." Jake covered her hand with his. "I'm frightened too. But I think maybe the best things in life are worth being scared for." When he kissed her, it was gentle and questioning, giving her every chance to pull away. She didn't. Instead, she leaned into him, her arms sliding around his neck, the kiss deepening into something fierce and desperate and full of hope against all odds. When they finally parted, both were breathing hard. Halona rested her forehead against his. "You are mine now," she said. Not quite a question. "I've been yours since the moment you pulled that bullet from my shoulder," Jake replied. "I just didn't know it yet." But their peace was short-lived. Word came through traders that the army was planning a major campaign. All Apache bands were to be rounded up and sent to reservations in Florida. No exceptions, no negotiations. Goyakla called a council. "We cannot run forever," he said heavily. "Each year there are fewer places to hide, fewer animals to hunt. Our children grow thin, our elders weaken." "Then we fight," said a warrior. "And die?" Goyakla shook his head. "I am tired of watching our people die. There must be another way." Jake had been silent, but now he spoke. "There might be. It's risky, probably impossible, but—" He looked around the circle of faces. "What if we could get legal protection? Land that's actually yours, recognized by law." "White man's law means nothing," someone spat. "Sometimes it does," Jake insisted. I've been thinking about this. There are precedents, treaties that give certain bands reservation land they actually control. If we could get to Washington, speak directly to the Indian Affairs Bureau, they would shoot us on sight, Karuk's replacement said. Not if you had an escort, a white man vouching for you. Jake met Goyakla's eyes. I could take you. I'm a citizen, not a fugitive anymore. I have rights, including the right to petition the government. This is foolishness, several voices said at once. But Goyakla held up his hand. Perhaps, or perhaps it is the only path left. He looked at Jake. You would do this, risk yourself again? For Halona, for her people? Jake nodded. In a heartbeat, the decision was made. Goyakla would take 3 warriors and travel with Jake to Washington. It was a desperate gamble, but desperation was all they had left. The night before they were to leave, Halona came to Jake's shelter. He looked up in surprise. It wasn't proper for her to be alone with him. I had to see you, she said simply, to say, if you do not come back, I'll come back. Jake stood, pulling her into his arms. I swear it. I'll come back to you. You cannot promise this. Her voice was muffled against his chest. The journey is dangerous. White men may kill you for helping us. My people may kill you if the journey fails. Then I better make sure it succeeds. Jake tilted her face up, memorizing every feature, the proud cheekbones, the fierce eyes, the soft mouth. Halona, when I get back, I'm going to ask your father for permission to marry you properly, in both traditions. Would you say yes? Tears spilled down her cheeks. You already know my answer, foolish white man. That night they made love for the first time, a desperate affirmation of life against the shadow of death. Halona was fierce and tender by turns, and Jake tried to show her with his hands and mouth everything he couldn't put into words, how she'd saved him in ways that had nothing to do with bullets, how she'd given him reason to be better than he'd ever been. Afterward, as she lay in his arms, she whispered in Apache. Jake didn't understand all the words, but he understood the meaning. Come back to me. Always, he promised. The journey to Washington took 2 months. 2 months of careful travel, of sleeping in ditches to avoid hostile settlers, of scrounging for food and hiding their Apache identity. Jake posed as a rancher, bringing friendly scouts to negotiate. And somehow, miraculously, they made it through. Washington was overwhelming, a sprawling city of marble and politics, where everyone had an agenda and no one wanted to listen. Jake spent weeks navigating bureaucracy, calling in every favor he could, finally getting an audience with a mid-level official at the Indian Affairs Bureau. The official, a weary man named Hutchins, listened to their proposal with the skepticism of someone who'd heard it all before. You want us to designate land for a band of Apache who've been raiding settlements for years? They've been defending their homeland, Jake corrected. But they're willing to negotiate, to settle on designated land, learn ranching and farming, coexist peacefully. They just need land that's actually theirs, not a reservation in Florida 1,000 miles from their ancestors. Hutchins studied Goyakla, who sat with quiet dignity despite being in the heart of enemy territory. Why should we trust you? Goyakla spoke in Apache, which Jake translated. Because we are tired of watching our children die. Because we know we cannot win by fighting. Because this man, he gestured to Jake, showed us that some white men can be trusted. Perhaps there are others. The negotiations dragged on for weeks. There were meetings with higher officials, testimony before committees, endless paperwork. Jake discovered a talent he never knew he had. The ability to speak the language of bureaucrats and politicians, to frame Apache desires in terms white lawmakers could accept. Finally, after 2 months of frustration and small victories, Hutchins called them to his office. "I've drafted a proposal," he said. 5,000 acres in the Arizona Territory, near your traditional lands. The tribe maintains sovereignty over internal affairs, agrees to cease all raids, allows a government agent to monitor but not control. Children attend school, but Apache language and customs are permitted. It wasn't everything. It wasn't perfect, but it was land and life and a future. "We accept," Goyakla said. The journey home took another month. When they finally reached the hidden camp, Halona ran to meet them, her face shining with relief and joy. She threw herself into Jake's arms, laughing and crying at once. "You came back! You actually came back!" "I promised," Jake said, holding her tight, "and I bring good news." When the camp heard about the land agreement, the reaction was mixed, joy and skepticism warring in equal measure. But Goyakla's word was law, and if he believed this was the right path, they would follow. That night, there was a celebration, dancing, singing, stories around the fire, and when the camp finally settled into sleep, Jake knelt before Goyakla. "Sir, I'd like permission to marry your daughter, in both traditions, Apache and white, to build a life with her on this new land as a bridge between our peoples." Goyakla was quiet for a long moment. Then, "You have proven yourself, cowboy. You risked your life for us twice, once to save us from soldiers, once to save us from despair. You work without complaint. You respect our ways, and," his eyes softened, "my daughter looks at you the way her mother once looked at me." "Is that a yes?" Jake asked, hope rising. "It is a yes, with one condition." Goyakla leaned forward. "You must take an Apache name. You will no longer be Jake Morrison, white man. You will be one of us." Jake's throat tightened. "I'd be honored." "Then I name you Dakota. It means friend to all, because that is what you have become." The Apache ceremony happened under the full moon. Halona wore a dress of white deerskin, her hair woven with eagle feathers and beads. Jake, now Dakota, wore clothes gifted by the warriors, leather and fringe that marked him as one of the people. Goyakla performed the ceremony, speaking blessings in Apache that Jake now understood. Two paths become one. Two hearts beat as one drum. May the spirits guide your steps together. They shared honey from a clay bowl and exchanged gifts. Halona gave him a knife with a wolf bone handle. He gave her a silver locket he'd bought in Washington with his last money, containing a lock of his hair. When Goyakla pronounced them married, the camp erupted in celebration. Jake, Dakota, kissed his wife under the stars, tasting future and hope and belonging. "My husband," Halona murmured against his lips. "My wife," he answered. "My heart, my home." 2 weeks later, they traveled to the nearest town for a legal ceremony. The justice of the peace was shocked. An Apache woman marrying a white man? But the marriage certificate from Washington officials gave him no grounds to refuse. As they left the courthouse, legally married in both traditions, they found themselves facing a familiar figure. Matthew Crane, now a territorial judge, stood on the steps, his face twisted with disgust. "Disgusting," he spat. "A white man debasing himself with a savage squaw." Dakota's hand tightened on his rifle, but Halona's touch on his arm held him back. She stepped forward, her chin high, her voice clear and proud. "This white man has more honor in his smallest finger than you have in your whole body, Judge. He risked his life for my people. Twice. What have you ever risked, except other people's money? Crane's face purpled. You dare speak truth? Halona's eyes blazed. And truth is, you sit in judgment of others while having no courage yourself. My husband is worth 10 of you. Dakota pulled her gently back before Crane could respond. Come on, love. He's not worth our time. As they rode away, Halona looked at him with fierce pride. You did not fight him. Didn't need to. You already won. Dakota grinned. Besides, I'm learning that the strongest fights aren't always physical. The following spring, they moved on to their new land, 5,000 acres of high desert and mountain valleys, where grass grew thick and water ran clear. The Apache camp relocated gradually, families arriving in groups, setting up not the temporary wickiups of fugitives, but permanent homes of adobe and timber. Dakota worked alongside Goyakla to build a ranch that honored both traditions. Cattle and horses managed in the Apache way, crops planted using techniques from both cultures. He taught English to children who still spoke Apache at home. He mediated between his new people and white neighbors who slowly, grudgingly, began to see the Apache as ranchers rather than raiders. And through it all, Halona was beside him, fierce and strong and endlessly capable. She managed the household, taught traditional crafts to young girls, worked alongside the men when needed, and slowly, over the months, her belly began to swell with their first child. On a winter night, during a howling storm, their daughter was born, a tiny, perfect girl with her mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn chin. Halona held her close, tears streaming down her face. What shall we name her? Dakota asked, his voice rough with emotion. Nasha, Halona said softly. It means owl, for wisdom to see in darkness, to find her path even when the world is confusing. Nasha, Dakota repeated, touching his daughter's tiny hand. Our bridge between two worlds. But peace never lasted long. 2 years after they'd settled on their land, word came that the government was reconsidering the agreement. New officials, new policies, pressure to move all Apache to Florida, regardless of treaties. Dakota rode to Washington again, this time with Halona and baby Nasha. If they wanted to take away their land, they'd have to face a married couple with a child, a family proving that coexistence was possible. The battle was different this time, fought in newspapers and congressional halls rather than canyons. Dakota told their story to anyone who'd listen. Halona spoke about her people's history, their willingness to adapt, their right to remain on their ancestral lands. And Nasha, toddling around government offices, charming hardened politicians with her mixed heritage and bright smile, became the face of a future where two peoples could become one family. It took 6 months, but they won. The agreement was upheld, with additional protections added. Their land was secure, for now, at least. On the journey home, as they traveled through the mountains Halona's people had roamed for generations, Dakota looked at his wife and daughter and felt something close to peace. We did it, he said. We actually did it. We did it together, Halona corrected, leaning against his shoulder. As we do everything. Together, Dakota agreed, the word that had become their promise, their prayer, their purpose. Years passed. The ranch prospered. More children came. 2 sons who learned to rope cattle and track deer with equal skill, who spoke Apache and English interchangeably, who grew up knowing they belonged to both worlds and neither, creating something entirely new. The government continued to pressure them, but the ranch became a symbol, Proof that integration could work, that Apache could thrive without forced relocation. Journalists visited, writing articles about the progressive Apache settlement. Other tribes sought Goyakla's advice on how to negotiate their own agreements. And through it all, Dakota and Halona worked side by side, two people from different worlds who'd found common ground in courage, respect, and love. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, their grandchildren playing in the yard, Apache, white, and blended together, Halona took Dakota's hand. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Giving up your old life, your people?" Dakota thought about the lonely drifter he'd been, moving from ranch to ranch with no purpose beyond the next paycheck. Then he looked at the life they'd built, the family, the community, the bridge between worlds. "I didn't give up anything," he said. "I found everything." Halona smiled, squeezing his hand. "You know what I remember most clearly? That first night, when you were wounded and fevered, when you said you'd trade anything for water. You had nothing. You were nothing by white man standards. And now you are my husband, and father of my children, friend to my people, builder of bridges." She leaned against his shoulder. "Now you are everything." Dakota wrapped his arm around her, pulling her close. "We're everything, together." As the sun set over their valley, casting long shadows across the land they'd fought for and won, their grandchildren's laughter echoed off the mountains. Apache words mixing with English, old ways blending with new. Proof that different worlds could not just coexist, but create something stronger than either alone. That night, as Dakota and Halona lay in bed, she traced the old bullet scar on his shoulder, the wound that had brought them together. "The night I saved you," she said softly, "I thought you were just another white man, someone to heal and send away." "What changed?" Dakota asked. "You did. You saw me, not as a savage or a squaw, but as a person, as an equal." Her fingers moved to his face. "You taught me that not all white men are the same, that some are worth saving in more ways than one." "You saved me that night," Dakota said, "but you kept saving me. Every day, you gave me purpose, belonging, love. You gave me a reason to be better than I ever was." "We saved each other," Halona corrected, "and we will keep saving each other. Every day, together." "Agreed," Dakota agreed. Outside an owl called, Nasha's namesake, wise and watchful. Inside, two people from different worlds slept in each other's arms, living proof that love could bridge any divide, that courage and respect could overcome any barrier, that the future belonged not to those who clung to the past, but to those brave enough to build something new. Their story wasn't unique. There were other mixed marriages, other attempts at integration across the frontier. Many failed. Many ended in tragedy, but theirs endured, a testament to the power of two people who chose each other despite everything, who fought for their love and their people with equal ferocity, who proved that the strongest alliances are forged not in similarity, but in the courage to embrace difference. And on the land they'd won, the community they'd built, the family they'd created, Apache and white children playing together, learning together, growing together, stood as a living monument to the truth that had guided them from the beginning, that we are stronger together than apart, that love transcends boundaries of race and culture, that the future belongs to bridge builders, not wall makers, that sometimes the stranger who saves your life becomes the love of your life, and that two paths, when they merge with courage and respect, can create something more beautiful than either could alone. The telegram arrived on a scorching July afternoon, delivered by a nervous rider who wouldn't dismount at the ranch. Dakota read it twice, his jaw tightening with each word. Halona saw his expression and immediately knew trouble was coming. "What is it?" she asked, wiping her hands on her apron. "Goyakla." Dakota's voice was rough. "He's sick, real sick. They want me to come to the reservation. He's asking for me." Halona's face went pale. Her father had refused to live on their ranch, choosing instead to stay with the remnants of his band on the government reservation 200 miles south. He'd said he was too old to change, too set in his ways. But they all knew the real reason. He was protecting them. If trouble came for him, it wouldn't touch his daughter's family. "We go," Halona said immediately. "All of us. It might not be safe. He is my father." Her voice broke. "We go." They rode out the next morning. Dakota and Halona, their 3 children, and a small escort of ranch hands who'd become family over the years. The journey south was hard, the summer heat brutal, but they pushed through. The reservation was a shock, even though Dakota had visited before. Rows of identical wooden shacks, dusty streets, defeated faces. This was what the government called progress, stripping away identity and calling it civilization. They found Goyakla in the agent's office, lying on a cot that was too short for his frame. He looked ancient, his face sunken, his breathing labored. But when he saw Halona, his eyes lit up. "Daughter," he rasped in Apache, "you came." Halona knelt beside him, taking his hand. "Of course, father. Did you think I wouldn't? I thought you might be too busy, too settled in your white man's world." But his smile said he'd known she'd come. Over the next days, Dakota watched his wife tend to her father with fierce devotion. She made traditional medicines, sang healing songs, told him stories of his grandchildren's accomplishments. Goyakla rallied slightly, enough to sit up and talk. "The land," he said one evening, gripping Dakota's arm with surprising strength. "The agreement we made. You must protect it. When I am gone, they will try to take it back." "I won't let them," Dakota promised. "You are one man, a white man who chose Apache ways." Goyakla's eyes were fierce despite his weakness. "They will not listen to you forever. You must make them understand. The land is not just dirt and grass. It is our spirit, our identity. Without it, we are nothing." "I understand," Dakota said quietly, "and I'll fight for it, I swear." Goyakla studied him for a long moment. "I chose well when I let you marry my daughter. You are more Apache than many born to it." He paused, struggling for breath. "Promise me something. Anything. When I die, bury me on our land, not here in this prison. Take me home." Dakota's throat tightened. "That might be illegal. I don't care about their laws." Goyakla's voice gained strength. "I lived free. I will be buried free. Promise me." "I promise." Goyakla died 3 days later, as the sun rose over the reservation. He went peacefully, Halona holding one hand and Dakota the other. His grandchildren gathered around, singing Apache songs. His last word was home. The reservation agent was sympathetic but firm. "Regulations require burial in the reservation cemetery. No exceptions." "He was a chief," Halona said, her voice cold with grief and fury. "He deserves to rest with his ancestors." "I'm sorry, Mrs. Morrison, The rules. Damn your rules. Halona's eyes blazed. You took his land, his freedom, his dignity. You will not take his body. That night, Dakota and his ranch hands wrapped Goyakla's body in traditional blankets and loaded it onto a wagon. They left the reservation at midnight, moving fast through the darkness. By the time the agent discovered the body was gone, they were 50 miles away. It was theft, technically. Grave robbery, even though there'd been no grave yet. The territorial marshal set riders after them, but Dakota's ranch hands, white, Apache, and Mexican alike, formed a protective escort that discouraged pursuit. They buried Goyakla on a high mesa overlooking their ranch, where he could see the land he'd helped secure for his people. The entire community came, Apache families, white neighbors who'd learned to respect them, even some Mexicans from across the border. They sang songs in 3 languages and told stories of a warrior who'd learned to make peace without surrendering his soul. Halona stood at the grave's edge long after the others had left, staring at the fresh earth. Dakota came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. "He's home," he said softly. "Yes." Halona leaned back against him. "But I feel lost. He was my compass, my strength. How do I go on without him? The way he taught you, with courage, with pride, with love for your people." Dakota turned her to face him. "He lives on in you, in our children, in everything we've built. He's not gone. He's just changed form." Halona buried her face in his chest and wept, deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. Dakota held her through it all, this fierce woman who'd saved his life and given him purpose, now broken by the loss of the man who'd given her both. As predicted, the government tried to reclaim the land within a year of Goyakla's death. A new Indian Affairs commissioner, eager to consolidate reservations and free up valuable territory, declared the original agreement void. "The chief who signed the treaty is dead," he announced in a hearing. "Therefore, the agreement dies with him." Dakota stood before the territorial court, his Apache name on the documents, his white skin a contradiction that confused everyone. The agreement was with the tribe, not one man. The land was granted in perpetuity. That means forever, not until the signer dies. "You're not even Apache," the government lawyer sneered. "You're a white man playing dress-up. You have no standing in this case." "I'm Dakota, adopted son of Goyakla, husband of Halona, father of Apache children. I'm a landowner, a rancher, and a citizen. I have every right to stand here." Dakota's voice was steel. "And I'm not leaving until justice is done." The battle dragged through the courts for 2 years. Dakota traveled to Washington again, this time with his sons, young men now, educated in both cultures, articulate and impressive. They testified before Congress, wrote letters to newspapers, lobbied every official who'd listen. Halona managed the ranch in his absence, proving herself as capable a leader as her father had been. She negotiated with neighbors, managed the herds, kept the community together through the uncertainty. When white ranchers tried to encroach on their land, thinking it undefended, she met them with a rifle and a smile that promised violence. "This is our land," she told them calmly. "Recognized by treaty and defended by law. Leave now, or I'll defend it another way." They left. Halona's reputation as Goyakla's daughter, and as a woman not to be crossed, preceded her. Finally, after 2 years of legal wrangling, the territorial Supreme Court ruled in their favor. The land grant was valid, permanent, and protected. The ranch could not be seized without violating federal treaty obligations. When Dakota returned with the news, Halona met him at the gate. She'd aged in his absence, lines around her eyes, silver threading through her dark hair. But her spirit was undiminished. "We won," he said simply. She kissed him, fierce and desperate. "I know, I never doubted." That night, they stood on the mesa where Goyakla was buried, watching the stars emerge. Their children and grandchildren were scattered across the ranch below, lights flickering in windows, smoke rising from chimneys, a community, a home, a future. "Your father would be proud," Dakota said. "He knew," Halona replied. "Before he died, he told me, 'I chose the right son. He will protect our people when I cannot.'" She looked at Dakota, her eyes shining with tears. He was right. "We protect them together," Dakota corrected, "as we do everything. Together," Halona agreed, the word that had become their truth, tested by time and trial and proven unbreakable. But life on the frontier was never truly peaceful. 5 years after the court victory, a new threat emerged: drought. The worst in living memory, turning the land to dust, drying up streams, killing livestock. Other ranches failed, families abandoning their claims and heading back east. The Apache ranch held on, but barely. They dug wells deeper, rationed water strictly, moved cattle to the high country where some grass still grew. But it wasn't enough. Animals died, crops failed, children went hungry. One night, as Dakota stared at their dwindling supplies, Halona found him. "We're going to lose everything," he said hopelessly. "Everything we fought for. Everything your father died to protect." "No." Halona's voice was firm. "We won't. Because Apache don't give up. We adapt, we survive." "How?" "There's no water, no grass, no—" "There's us." She gripped his shoulders. "There's our community. There's our knowledge of this land, both Apache wisdom and white man's technology. We combine them. We find a way." She was right. They called a meeting of the entire community, every family, every elder, every able-bodied adult. Halona stood before them, her voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "We face 2 choices," she said in Apache, Dakota translating for those who needed it. "We can abandon this land, scatter to reservations or cities, lose everything we've built, or we can fight together." "Fight how?" someone asked. "We can't make rain." "No. But we can change how we use water." Halona gestured to an old Apache woman. "Grandmother, tell them about the ancient ways, how our ancestors survived droughts." The elder spoke of traditional techniques, planting drought-resistant crops, harvesting morning dew, finding hidden springs using bird flights and plant growth. Then Dakota added white man's knowledge: windmills to pump deep water, irrigation ditches, drought-resistant cattle breeds. They implemented everything. The whole community worked from dawn to dusk, digging, building, planting. They shared resources, pooled knowledge, supported each other through the worst of it. And slowly, impossibly, they survived. When the rains finally came 2 years later, breaking the drought with spectacular thunderstorms, the ranch was leaner but intact. Other spreads had failed, but they'd endured. Standing in the rain, soaked to the skin and laughing, Dakota pulled Halona close. "We did it. Again. We always do." She kissed him, tasting rain and victory. "Because we have something they don't." "What's that?" Each other. All of us. Not just survival, but purpose. We're not just ranchers or Apache or white. We're family, and family doesn't give up. As they stood in the rain, their community emerging from houses to dance and sing in the life-giving water, Dakota realized the truth of what they'd built. It wasn't just a ranch or a refuge. It was a new way of living, where different peoples didn't just coexist, but thrived together. Where old wisdom and new knowledge combined to create something stronger than either alone. Their oldest son, now 25 and newly married to a Mexican woman from the next valley, came to stand with them. "Father, Mother, we want to build our house on the North Ridge, start our own family there." Halona smiled through happy tears. "That's perfect. Your grandfather used to hunt there. He'd love knowing his great-grandchildren will play on that land." As the rain continued to fall, washing away years of dust and fear, Dakota looked at the life they'd built, children and grandchildren spreading across the valley, homes rising where once there'd been only wilderness, a community of mixed bloods and mixed cultures, creating a future no one could have imagined. "Your father's dream," he said to Halona, "it's coming true." "Our dream," she corrected, taking his hand. "Yours, mine, his, all of ours together. That's the only way dreams ever come true." And as the sun broke through the clouds, painting a rainbow across the valley, the future stretched before them, uncertain, challenging, but filled with hope, because they'd learned the most important lesson of all, that bridges are stronger than walls, that love transcends boundaries, that the strongest foundations are built not on sameness, but on the courage to embrace difference and make it strength, and that when you fight for something together, really together, with all your heart and soul, there's nothing you can't overcome. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Are you listening at home, during your commute, or perhaps while working? Please subscribe to the From Wild West channel and share your thoughts in the comments below. What did you think of Halona and Jake's journey? Your feedback means the world to us.